In our headlines on this Tuesday afternoon, July 16th, here in South Korea. Donald Trump is officially nominated as the Republican Party's candidate for the 2024 U.S. presidential election in November, with Ohio Senator J.D. Vance as his running mate. And Sunday's news of an apparent assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump does little to affect trading on Wall Street back on Monday, with the market closing at record highs. And on the domestic trade front, South Korea's auto exports hit above $37 billion during the first half of this year, up almost 4% on year, fueled by global demand for its hybrid cars. We start in the U.S. at the Republican National Convention back on Monday, during which former President Donald Trump won the nomination for the 2024 presidential election in November. Our Yoon reports.
Donald Trump has been officially nominated as the Republican Party's presidential candidate at the Republican National Convention. During the first day of the convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on Monday, the former U.S. president secured the nomination for this year's election, receiving a majority of votes from the 2,400 delegates. After an acceptance speech on the final day of the convention on Thursday, Trump would then be in place for a possible rerun of the 2020 election against Joe Biden on November 5th, although the incumbent president is facing increasing pressure from within his party not to run. Trump also announced his running mate on Monday, selecting Ohio Senator J.D. Vance as his vice presidential pick. The 39-year-old, who once said he was an anti-Trump Republican, has since become Trump's supporter. Following the nomination, U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas on Monday announced that security measures for Trump have been increased in response to Saturday's shooting incident. Mayorkas also indicated that an independent investigation would address security concerns surrounding the assassination attempt. Despite an injury to his right ear sustained in the shooting, the former president is continuing his presidential campaign as scheduled. On Monday, it was also reported that Trump's criminal case over the mishandling of classified documents had been dismissed. A Trump-appointed U.S. district judge in Florida ruled that the appointment of special counsel Jack Smith, who filed the indictment against Trump, was unlawful. However, Smith's team indicated that they would appeal to the decision. Yoon, Arirang News.
And the recent assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump did little to dampen trading on Wall Street on Monday. The market closed at fresh highs. Our Isingjae has the numbers.
It was feared that the weekend assassination attempt on U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump would bring uncertainty to the U.S. financial market. However, Wall Street responded with a record-high close for the Dow Jones and S&P 500 indexes. The Dow Jones closed up 210.82 points, or 0.53% from the previous trading session, to end Monday's trading session at a fresh record high of 40,211.72. The S&P 500, which has seen all-time highs being shattered regularly throughout the year, saw yet another record high, finishing the day at 5,631.22, up 15.87 points, or 0.28% from the previous trading session. Monday's trading also saw a number of stocks linked to Trump or his policies jump. Trump Media, the parent company of social networking service Truth Social, soared 31.4%, while Tesla, whose CEO Elon Musk has openly expressed his support for Trump, also closed up 1.8%. Energy-related stocks like ExxonMobil and Chevron and the health insurance stocks like United Health rose due to expectations of deregulation following a possible Trump re-election. The market expectation is that if Trump does win the November U.S. presidential election, he will strengthen trade barriers, expand tax cuts, and ease regulations related to cryptocurrency and climate change responses. Meanwhile, Wall Street also responded positively to the increasing prospects of a September rate cut. U.S. Fed Chair Jerome Powell, at an event at the Economic Club of Washington on Monday, said that U.S. inflation data over the second quarter of this year added somewhat to confidence that the economy is on pace to reach the central bank's target inflation of 2%. While Powell did not directly mention a September rate cut, his comments suggest such a decision may not be far off. Isingjae, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol says South Korea's alliance with the U.S. is now, quote, truly nuclear-based. Remarks to this end were shared earlier on this Tuesday during his first cabinet meeting following his attendance at the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. last week, during which he and his U.S. counterpart, Joe Biden, signed a joint statement ushering in guidelines on nuclear deterrence on the Korean peninsula. President Yoon also touched upon his separate bilateral engagements with 13 world leaders on the sidelines of the security summit and called on his cabinet for prompt follow-up measures. On the domestic front, he urged for proactive policies in better preparation for the devastating impact of the monsoon rain on people and property amid flash floods and landslides. A high-ranking North Korean diplomat based in Cuba defected to South Korea last November. According to a government source here, Councillor Lee Il-kyu entered South Korea with his wife and children. The 52-year-old was a leading expert on Latin America-related policy within the North Korean Foreign Ministry and served in Cuba twice. He reportedly decided to defect after dispute with his headquarters over his job evaluation. A South Korean-made rocket system looks to be included in the U.S.'s arsenal following a final test last Friday that it passed with flying colors. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korea's Bigung Poniard-guided rocket system has passed the final test needed for potential use in the U.S. The weapon, developed by defense company LIG Next 1 in cooperation with the Agency for Defense Development, was test-fired in waters off Hawaii last Friday on the sidelines of the Rim of the Pacific maritime exercise. LIG Next 1 announced Monday that the Bigungs successfully hit all 6 targets. Friday's test was the last in a series of successful evaluations conducted by the U.S. Defense Department over the past 5 years. It has shown a 100% hit rate in all foreign comparative tests aimed at evaluating whether foreign weapons satisfy valid defense requirements for use in the U.S. The Bigung is a 70mm low-cost guided imaging rocket that can be fired from land, sea, and air. It's known for its cost-effectiveness and ability to accurately hit multiple targets at once. Friday's success marks a significant milestone as it would open the door for exports, representing the first time a complete South Korean-made weapon system is integrated into Washington's arsenal.
Exports would come following a budget approval by the U.S. Congress and a contract procedure after the test launch. We are working on this in many ways.
A day before the launch, the U.S. Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Lisa Franchetti visited the South Korean Navy's vessel, the Cheonjabong, where the test launch took place, to take a closer look at the weapon. She said the launch test of Bigung during RIMPAC 2024 marks another advancement in integrating unmanned systems into U.S. naval operations. Commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Samuel Paparo also showed great interest in the South Korean weapon.
If we're not curious about each other's capabilities, we do each other a tremendous disservice. So of course, I'm interested in this. And if we can find ways to build it either on license from each other, or we find ways to build it on export from each other, if it works and if it's good and if it benefits our alliance, we should do it.
Following the successful test results, South Korea would now have to see if it could clinch its first-ever defense export deal with the U.S. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Findings for the first half of this year show Korea's auto exports soaring to a record high, driven by stellar sales in the North American market. Our Park Gun-woo has details.
South Korea's automobile exports reached a record high in the first half of this year. Data from the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Tuesday showed that the value of automobile exports from January to June was over $37 billion. That's an on-year increase of 3.8%. The ministry said expanding demand and sales of hybrid cars and increased exports to North America were behind South Korea's performance. Specifically, exports to North America jumped 26% compared to a year before, reaching nearly $22 billion. That's in contrast to a decrease in exports to all the other regions during the first half of 2024. The ministry said the drop in outbound shipments to the European market was mainly due to subsidy suspensions for electric cars and unsold inventory from last year. In June alone, export value was around $6.2 billion, similar to last year, despite fewer working days. That continued a run of monthly auto export value above $6 billion in 7 of the last 8 months, with February being an exception due to the Lunar New Year holiday. By region, outbound shipments to North America surpassed $3.6 billion. Exports to the Middle East also saw an increase for the first time in 8 months in June. Production dropped slightly by 2% on year due to a base effect. The industry ministry said better performance is expected for the second half of the year on increased productivity and a return to full-scale production at a Kia factory in Gwangmyeong in July after a refit. The ministry added it will be supporting companies so that the country can reach its export goal of $100 billion for cars and auto parts for this year. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, doctors in training appear adamant in their protest of government plans to expand medical school seats next year. A final call on Monday for their return to hospitals went largely unanswered. Our Choi Soo-young has the latest.
The majority of trainee doctors did not return to their hospitals on Monday, the due date for a final decision as to whether they will return or resign. Before that, training hospitals sent text messages asking them to provide an answer by Monday noon. According to the Big Five hospitals in Seoul, very few trainee doctors responded. The hospitals have said that if the trainee doctors do not return or respond, their resignations will be processed automatically. The trainee doctors who have refused to return since taking part in a massive walkout against the government's medical reform plan are saying that the medical school admissions quota hike issue has not been fundamentally resolved. According to the government, as of last Thursday, only 69 out of a total of 10,506 trainee doctors in all 211 training hospitals who submitted resignation letters had their resignations accepted. Also, only around 8% of trainee doctors are working at hospitals currently. After the resignations are processed, hospitals will recruit new trainee doctors starting in September, while it's reported that almost none of them are planning to reapply for training positions. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
In other news, an unprecedented heat dome is suffocating many states in the U.S., leading to concerning civilian casualties. Our Yoon has more.
At least 38 people are suspected to have died in 6 states this summer from heat-related illnesses caused by new record-breaking temperatures. That heat wave is now spreading to the East Coast, with more than 140 million Americans in 33 states under some extent of heat alert for Tuesday. Meteorologists warn that temperatures will climb above the historical average, extending heat alerts from Maine to Florida, with health departments preparing for heat-related emergencies. Major cities along the East Coast, including Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, were put under an excessive heat warning. And in Philadelphia, the heat index, which is what the temperature feels like with humidity, has been forecast to reach 40 degrees Celsius. New York City and Boston are under a heat advisory through Tuesday. In southeast Texas, hundreds of thousands of residents have been left without power after being hit by Hurricane Beryl earlier in the week and are now left to get through the scorching heat. As of Monday afternoon, over 280,000 still had no power. Las Vegas set a new all-time heat record of 120 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly 49 degrees Celsius, on July 7th, then set a new record of 7 straight days of temperatures at or above 46 degrees Celsius. Such temperatures have turned the Las Vegas Valley into a giant oven, forcing officials to close public pools and museums in order to keep people indoors for most of the day. Weather conditions have become intolerable even for those used to extreme desert climate. Meteorologists say the heat will be concentrated on the East Coast on Tuesday and could last into Wednesday, but a cold front will bring an end to the record heat in the East by Wednesday night. Yoon, Arirang News.
NATO will open a liaison office in Geneva where UN-affiliated organizations are centered. According to the Swiss government on Monday, it signed an agreement with the military alliance during a ceremony in Bern. The agreement covers the legal status of NATO's Geneva liaison office as well as the privileges and immunity of its staff. While Switzerland is not a NATO member country, it has been operating a partnership program with the alliance in various fields since last year. NATO is expected to use the office to carry out cooperation with various UN agencies headquartered in the city, including the UN Human Rights Council and the Conference on Disarmament. Over in London, K-pop boy band Stray Kids lit up one of UK's largest music festivals this past Sunday. The 8-member group made its debut as headliners on the last day of this year's British Summertime Hyde Park Festival, a first for a K-pop boy band. Stray Kids performed about 20 songs over some 2 hours in front of a reported audience of some 50,000. The group's headlining performance follows Blackpink's debut last year at the same festival, which marked a first in K-pop history. Now, Korea may not be among the world's leading potato producers, but it is seeking a lead in exporting quality seed potatoes even to their countries of origin. Our Cha Yoon-kyung explains.
This place filled with glass houses is the Highland Agriculture Research Institute, the #1 research center for potatoes in Korea. It is a prerequisite to ensure disease-free seed potatoes, since the tuber exhibits clonal propagation, which can pass viruses onto the next generation. In this place, 160,000 disease-free seed potatoes are produced using hydroponics with additional nutrients such as calcium and magnesium. Potatoes arrived in South Korea in 1824 during the reign of King Sunjo of the Joseon dynasty, becoming a major food source during times of austerity. In 1961, official research into potato cultivation began with a specialized research institute being opened in Taegwallyeong. The research center successfully developed new technology to produce and replicate disease-free seed potatoes through hydroponics in the early 1990s for the first time in the world.
Dr. Woo Jang-chun set up the research center here in Taegwallyeong, where the cool climate is ideal for growing potatoes in summer.
The center has promoted 47 species of potatoes so far, establishing South Korea as an advanced country that exports disease-free seed potatoes to 20 countries in Africa, Asia, and even South America, where potatoes were first cultivated. The United Nations Potato Research Center is also trying to introduce Korea's technology for producing seed potatoes. The Rural Development Administration held an international symposium highlighting the history and achievements in research and development of potato cultivation through international cooperation, marking the 200th anniversary of the introduction of potatoes to Korea. Now, Korean seed potatoes are in the global spotlight as they have also become a source for cosmetics and medical supplies production beyond food resources. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. The European Union on Monday announced sanctions against 5 Israeli individuals and 3 entities for what it described as serious and systematic human rights abuses against Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. The EU sanctioned far-right activists Benzi Gopstein and Baruch Mazel. It also sanctioned settler activists Moshe Sharvet, Zviva Yosef, and Issachar Man, who each ran or created illegal outposts. The EU also targeted Zav 9, an activist group that has attempted to sabotage the delivery of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. Under the EU global human rights sanctions regime, all people listed on Monday are subject to a travel ban to the EU and will have their external assets frozen. All mentioned individuals and entities, except for Mazel, have already been sanctioned by the United States. UNICEF said on Monday that due to an escalation of fighting in Sudan's Sennar state, some 50,000 people displaced by the country's civil war have sought refuge in the town of Qadarif in eastern Sudan, with authorities expecting more to arrive in the coming days. The United Nations said on Thursday that while they set up talks aimed at brokering possible ceasefires to facilitate humanitarian aid and protect civilians, only one of the warring parties showed up. The civil war in Sudan between the National Army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces erupted in April last year over the integration of forces in a transition to democratic elections. The UN estimates that nearly half of Sudan's population, some 25 million, are in need of aid and under threat of a famine, while almost 10 million have been forced to flee their homes. Kenyan police said on Monday that they have arrested a suspected serial killer who confessed to killing 42 women, including his wife. Police said the 33-year-old suspect, Collins Jumaisi, was arrested after 9 bodies were found at a quarry close to Jumaisi's home in Nairobi. They also found mobile phones and identity cards at the suspect's home, as well as a machete, industrial rubber gloves, sellotape, nylon sacks, allegedly used in the murders. According to authorities, Jumaisi confessed to luring and killing the women before dumping their remains at the quarry, adding that the murders began with his wife in 2022, with the most recent killing on the 11th of July. Argentinians celebrated a record 16th Copa America title after beating Colombia in the final of South America's regional football competition. After a goalless 90 minutes, the match went to extra time before Argentina's Inter Milan striker, Lautaro Martinez, scored the only goal of the game with a 112th-minute strike. That goal at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens, Florida, gave Argentina a second consecutive Copa America title. Sunday's game also marked the final international appearance of Argentina's 36-year-old Angel Di Maria, who said Copa will be his last international tournament. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Jeollanam-do province saw record-breaking downpours overnight, lashing down at 78 millimeters an hour. And southern provinces will continue to see rain until late tonight. Central regions will see monsoon rain arriving this afternoon, pouring down heavily tomorrow at dawn with up to 100 millimeters in the forecast. Temperature-wise, the capital and Jeju had a tropical night, and central regions should have highs that are lower than yesterday, but hotter in southern provinces. Western regions are under heat advisories, especially in Gwangju and nearby areas today. Taking a closer look at today's highs now, Seoul sees a high of 30 degrees Celsius, but Jeju is blistering hot at 33 degrees Celsius. And it's going to be rain-free on Jeju for the rest of the week, but people there need to brace for searing heat. Meanwhile, heavy monsoon rain that's forecast in central parts of the country will lash down into Thursday. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions. That ends our Tuesday afternoon newscast. Coming up next is our daily panel session. Do stay with us.